Today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest project killers out there, vague customer feedback. You know what I'm talking about. We're going to show you how to translate those fuzzy, emotional complaints into hard data you can actually use to build something incredible. Let's dive in.
So we've all been here. You get that one critical comment. It's just too slow. It's the kickoff for so many projects, but honestly, it's a huge trap. You immediately assume they mean slow shipping, when what they actually mean is the website takes forever to load.
And right here, this is the critical moment. What does slow really mean? Because if you guess, and you guess wrong, you could waste months, even years, building a solution to a problem the customer never even had. That kind of misunderstanding can absolutely kill your project before it even gets off the ground.
That's what we call the guesswork trap. And believe me, it's where so many well-intentioned projects go to die. So the big question is, how do we avoid it?
Well, the solution is surprisingly simple. Stop guessing. Acting on assumptions is absolute project poison. Instead, we need to use a disciplined methodology, something like Six Sigma, that completely replaces hunches with a structured process of translation. It's all about turning that vague complaint into something solid and actionable.
So this brings us to the core idea for today, making that leap from the customer's voice to measurable quality. You have to learn to speak two languages here, the customer's language and the project's language.
First up, you have the voice of the customer, or VOC. Now this is your raw material. It's all that information coming straight from the customer, telling you what they want. But it's often in these really subjective, emotional, and kind of imprecise terms like slow, difficult, or unfriendly.
And then on the other side, you've got what's critical to quality, or CTQ. Think of this as the finished product of your translation work. CTQs are the measurable, super-specific characteristics your team can actually design, build, and measure against to make that customer happy.
And this is where the real magic happens. This slide just shows that powerful transformation in action. A customer says, "It takes way too long to process my mortgage." The translated goal, the CTQ, isn't just some vague idea like speed up the loan. No, it's the customer receives their check on their requested date. Do you see how precise that is? Now that is a target you can actually aim for and hit.
And you know what? This works for any complaint. You put me on hold becomes get the customer to the right person on the very first try. Every single time, we're turning that vague frustration into a crystal clear, actionable target. This is the core skill we're all trying to build here.
Okay, so how do we actually do this translation systematically? Well, the main tool we're going to use is called the CTQ tree.
I absolutely love this analogy. You need to peel the customer's vague complaints just like an onion, one layer at a time. You can't just jump straight to the answer. You have to break it down systematically until you get right to the very core. This right here is your map for that entire process. It's a simple but really powerful structure. You start with the customer's broad, high-level need. Then you identify the drivers. Those are the general categories that influence the quality of that need. And finally, you break those drivers down into specific, measurable requirements.
So the process is pretty straightforward. Step 1, you lock down that critical customer need. Step 2, you brainstorm all the drivers of quality for that need. And then step 3, for each of those drivers, you define the detailed, quantifiable requirements that will tell you if you're actually succeeding.
And this is just a brilliant example of the whole thing. The customer's need is for excellent service. Okay, what on earth does that mean? Well, the drivers are things like friendly technicians, knowledgeable employees, and timely service. And from there, we get to the real gold, the measurable requirements, like customer calls are returned the same day at least 90% of the time. Now that is something your team can actually get to work on.
Okay, so now we have our measurable requirements. Awesome, but that's only half the battle. A metric like website load time is totally useless without a target. I mean, how fast is fast enough? To answer that, we have to define the goalposts. This is exactly where we use specification limits. These set the absolute boundaries of what the customer finds acceptable. You've got an upper specification limit, or USL, for the maximum you can go, and a lower specification limit, or LSL, for the minimum. Anything outside this range is, plain and simple, a failure. And this is exactly why it's so critical. A metric without these limits is almost useless. I mean, take website load time. Your internal target might be 1 second.
Great, but the customer might tolerate up to 1.5 seconds. That's your upper specification limit. The moment it hits 1.6 seconds, you failed them. These limits are what define success in the real world.
So when you're working on your own projects, just ask these simple questions to find your limits. What's the absolute best-case scenario the customer expects? And what's the absolute slowest they can stand before they consider you to have failed? The space between those 2 points, that's your operating window.
Once you master this, it's honestly like having a new superpower. You're no longer just guessing what people want. You're building exactly what they need. And it's all based on data.
So here's your toolkit, all wrapped up. First, you translate the subjective voice of the customer into objective, critical to quality metrics. Second, you deconstruct those needs using the CTQ tree to get to those specific, measurable requirements. And third, you define the goalposts with crystal clear upper and lower specification limits.
So I'm going to leave you with this one question. What vague customer requirements and hidden team assumptions are driving your projects right now? Really think about it. The entire success of your next project might just depend on your ability to translate.
And that's all for this explainer. Now that we know how to quantify our metrics, the next big question is, where in the process do we actually start making improvements? Next time, we'll map it all out and draw the line of life and death for your process with a tool called CPOC. I'll see you then.